evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me all right? Is it good? You can't hear? Is that better? Jeez, I got to be right on top of it. That's better? Okay. Okay, we got a lot here tonight, so let's get started. First, we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for the prayer. I pledge Heavenly Father, I'd like to thank you for everyone that came out tonight to be a positive influence on our political process. I'd like to thank also our elected officials and for them taking the time to meet with us away from their families. I'd like to pray that we are all respectful to one another, to be civil to each other when we disagree, and we will. And I hope we all do honors to you. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, our main speaker tonight will be Congressman Scott Perry from the Pennsylvania 4th Congressional District. Then we'll have Alex Shorb, the new chairman of the York Republican Committee. We'll then give a couple minutes to Senators Folmer and Wagner, and then I'll finish up and talk about how things are going federally, way down to locally, and how the 9/12 Patriots really works into all that. Also, would like to acknowledge, I think, Kristen Phillips-Heel, are you here as well? Oh, right there, thank you. And Kate Klunk also said she would be here. She's on her way. Oh, there she is. Okay, and we invited some others as well, but there was scheduling conflict, so they could not come tonight. First of all, Congressman Scott Perry, he's here to talk about what's going on in Washington. After he's finished up, we'll open it up for a couple questions. Please keep your questions to questions, not statements. We want to get as many questions in as possible, and we want to respect his time. Congressman Perry.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good evening, Patriots. I think my plan's going to be is to kind of give you an overview. I think most of you, because you're here, you're more engaged than most people, let's face it, and you probably know much of what's going on. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about what's going on, what I think is going to come up. All right, we've got 2 weeks of session, about 2.5 weeks of session in September, and then I don't think there's much in October, and then we're into the November election, and then everything is really dependent on what happens in the November election. So there's not a lot of time from a being in Washington, D.C. standpoint to get things accomplished or not accomplished. And so I just want to frame it in those terms. And just to let you know, too, that while we're in our district, in August, Congress is not in session in Washington, D.C. right now. Now, I know the president, I guess, is at Martha's Vineyard or whatever he is, and that's great. We don't begrudge anybody a vacation, but this is the time for members like myself to be in the district and get all your meetings caught up, all the people that want you to come to their business and all that stuff. So at least for us, we don't know about other members of Congress, but my schedule is as full now throughout the month of August as it is every other week, whether it's in D.C. or what have you. Just to let you know, because I know you hear that Congress is on vacation for a month. There's not a vacation for a month. It's called a district work period, and that's what we use it for. So with that, I want to just talk to you about, I wouldn't necessarily call them successes, but some of the major highlights from the last year and a half. So it's been about a year and a half, a little more, since I was sworn in. The Farm Bill. The Farm Bill was a big deal from the standpoint that, first of all, it's a big deal for communities like ours and communities across the country. But from a legislative standpoint, the big deal is that we were able to split the Farm Bill finally. And so just so you know how this goes, for a very long time, people in rural districts wouldn't vote for things in urban districts and vice versa. So when it comes to what we call nutrition, which is essentially the food stamp program, if you look at using the old terminology, the food stamp program, they put that, when they say they, Congress put that with the agricultural program, with milk and with farm crop insurance and all those things. They put those things together to get the urbans to vote with the suburbans or the rurals, okay, to get them to, because they could never move the thing if you just did each one individually. And generally speaking, it was a 50-50 proposition when it started, but over time it became about an 85% nutrition program or food stamp program and about a 15% agricultural program. But yet people still were expected to vote for it and move the ball forward for farmers and for the more urban centers that typically habitually use the food stamp program, the nutrition program more heavily. We could not pass the bill. The Republican conference could not pass the bill. And when I say the Republican conference couldn't, I imagine that we could have made the bill out of committee such that more of the liberal members of either the Republican Party or the Democrat Party would have voted for it, and a few Republicans would have. But that's not really our goal generally as a conference. We want to do things on a conservative basis, but there wasn't enough to get conservatives to go for it. And so they ran it out of committee and they took it to the floor, and it failed. It failed, which is really it's not what you want to see in your leadership, to take a bill to the floor and not know it's going to pass. It makes you look kind of foolish, quite honestly. So leadership came back to us and said, you know, what would it have to be to have you to vote for it? And I said, you know, a lot of us said, myself included, first of all, this nutrition program is way out of whack, and not to mention the agricultural program. I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but there are members of Congress who are millionaires that we pay $1 million subsidies to. Your tax dollars go to you know, with these crop subsidies, and none of it's right. But we can't cut out, you know, whatever cuts need to be made, a little bit out of food stamps and a whole lot out of agriculture. It should be even, okay? And not to mention, we don't want to vote for something's bad to get the thing that we need. So, you know, of course, we have Harrisburg and York in the district, and it's more heavily nutrition dependent, but we also have agriculture there. But why don't we split this thing up and have an honest conversation about both? And really get to it. And they said it will never pass if we do that. And we said, well, it's never going to pass if you don't try. It's never going to pass if you don't try. And we convinced them to do it, which hadn't happened in 40 or 50 years. And I will tell you, I know many people in the room, let me just get this right out front. I talked to some folks earlier this week about your political impact, or frustrated. You're frustrated because you're saying, we're here, we're yelling, but it doesn't change anything. It does change things. This is a huge deal, where in the past this thing just would move through because everybody had this expectation and there was no way else to get it done. So we split it apart. People are against it, right? They're calling me, all these organizations are against splitting it apart. But I'll tell you, I took a couple days and I called farmers in the district. Farmers that I knew of, or farms that I knew where they sat, and I would just get my staff and say, there's a farm on B. Secker Road or something, I know about where it is, find that guy's number and call him, I want to talk to him. And every farmer said, split it up. Vote against the Farm Bureau, vote against all these organizations and split it up. And we did, and we passed a great bill, not a good bill, a great bill that did all kinds of great stuff. But, now, so we sent it to the Senate. We sent it to the Senate. And I know we got a couple senators in the room, and when I was in the House, in the Republican House with the Republican Senate, you know, an older gentleman came to me and said, you think the enemy's on the other side of the aisle. They're not. They're on the other side of the building. But that having been said, this Senate really is, with Harry Reid in charge. So what they did was they put both of them back together again, and almost all the reforms that we put in, like if you're an able-bodied single American, on food stamps, we want you to have a work search requirement, not a work have requirement. We want you to be actively looking for work. Is that too much to ask? If you're a felony, if you have felony conviction for drug use, we want to be able to drug test you commensurate with your access to the access card, to food stamps. Is that too much to ask? The Senate stripped all that stuff out. The Senate stripped all that stuff out in what's called the conference report and sent it back to us, which is why I voted no. All right, so it's unfortunate, but I guarantee you, if we can win the Senate and maintain the Senate under Republican leadership, the next time it comes back around, we're going to split it up, not only in the House, but in the Senate, and we're going to have a real conversation about the thing. Keystone XL. We passed it multiple times in the House. We passed it in ways that took the president. Right now, because it crosses or it has a nexus with Canada, All right, it's a Canadian company, and it goes into Canada. It requires presidential approval. So we passed a measure that takes it out of the president's hands based on his own EPA's findings. All right, with the new route and all that stuff, we passed it out of the House, bipartisan, Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals. It goes to the Senate, and it sits like I think we're up to about 400 bills that have gone to the Senate with no action whatsoever. And look, the House is Republican, you know this, the Senate is Democrat. We don't expect to get everything our way. We don't expect to get a lot of things our way. But we can't work on our legislative process if the Senate won't pass any bills at all and send them to us. And that's where we are. So if you don't like our version of Keystone XL, great. Show us yours. But Harry Reid is keeping senators from voting because if you vote, you're liable to make constituents mad. And if constituents are mad because you vote, they're liable not to vote for you. So the easiest thing to do is to not vote for anything or on anything, which is what the Senate essentially is doing. All right. Again, 400 bills of all different types, and what I want to do is spend more time answering questions. But of the time that we have left in the 113th, we're going to continue to work on the jobs and economic component of our country, okay? It has to do with taxes. It has to do with regulation, mostly as a general theme, and we'll be sending packages to the Senate in that regard. Small business access to capital, and since we can't do comprehensive tax reform, and let me just caveat that. When I say we can't, Dave Camp, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, he is term limited 6 years, and this is the end of his term. And he's worked on a tax reform package for all of those 6 years. And he actually got it out of committee. He's allowed to get it out of committee this year. All right, and it's pretty decent. As a draft, it's pretty decent. It has some things that each member is going to have a problem with, but it basically takes our archaic system, all these thousands and thousands of pages, gets rid of a lot of the loopholes, and makes it to, I call it 3 rates. 25%, 15%, and 0. 0 is the one that nobody talks about. There will be people that pay 0. But it really simplifies it, and it makes us at least competitive with the rest of the world. Now, he's frustrated because we're not going to take a vote on it in the House. The reason we're not going to take a vote on it is because in the Senate, they worked on their own tax package, reform package, which wasn't what I would like, but it was better than what we have now. But the president has said he wants $1 trillion to do tax reform. The House's plan is neutral, so we're not looking to raise more money for the federal government. We're looking to reform the system to make it easier and lower the rate and get more people involved and pulling the wagon. But we're not going to do it if it requires us to raise taxes, and so that's why we're not going to spend any time on it, because the president said, if you're going to reform the system, I want $1 trillion more coming into the Treasury. We just don't want to accept that as a Republican conference. And you got to understand this as well. Anytime that we send a bill to the Senate, once they pass a companion measure, automatically it can come to conference. And quite honestly, there's enough of us that are afraid, or whatever you want to call it, that once we conference a bill and it gets put out there for a vote in the House of Representatives, more of the liberals will vote for it than the moderates, and we don't want that happening, so we would prefer not to conference bill, and that's what's particularly happening with immigration. Now, there's a little secret with immigration as well. The Senate passed the Comprehensive Immigration Act, and you keep hearing about it. Republicans are against it, and you're not for anything, and so on and so forth. The Senate has not sent that bill to the House of Representatives. They passed it, and they're holding it. The reason they haven't sent it to us is because it raises and it generates revenue. Revenue-generating bills cannot emanate from the Senate by the Constitution. They must emanate from the House. And they know this. What they're hoping that we'll do is pass a bill that we will send over to the Senate, and then they can send that back, put that together with our bill in conference, and work a deal that probably every Democrat, quite honestly, no disrespect to the Democrats in the room, but every Democrat will vote for and 30 Republicans will vote for. And there's enough of us in the House, Republican majority, that say absolutely not. We will not allow that, and we've gotten a commitment from the Speaker to not allow that to happen. And so, but that's a little secret about that. All right, we would like to lower the cost of energy, and again, it means still working on Keystone. The federal lands, the president tells us that drilling and exploration is up across the country. It is on private land, but it's woefully down on federal lands. And it's amazing, if you take a look at what the federal government owns west of the Mississippi, you will realize that this country is owned west of the Mississippi by the federal government. And even though you can live on that land, the Bureau of Land Management dictates what you can do and what you won't do with it. And we saw a thing with a rancher earlier this year based on some of these dictates and provisions. Bottom line is we are not drilling on federal lands because the president won't allow it. He's appealing to his base. And, we're still, when he got elected, I think gas was about $1.85. I think I paid $2.37 or something today. It's down a little bit, which is good, but it doesn't have to be $3.37. I'm sorry, yeah. All right. Yeah, right. So we would like to work on that. And a lot of it, quite honestly, is the disallowance of that and regulatory oversight. The waters of the U.S., if you're not familiar, I urge you to take a look at that. It is a rule. It is a rule coming out of the EPA and the administration, a rule to do what they could not get legislatively. And when I say what they could not get, I want to be factual here. This is a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, and a Democrat president could not pass this bill themselves, could not make it happen in the Supreme Court. So what they're going to do is enact it by fiat out of the EPA. And literally what this does is right now there's a delineation of the federal government's purview. Anything that is navigable water, classified, characterized as navigable water, is within the federal government's purview. So if you're on the Mississippi, the federal government has, that's their regulatory requirement through the EPA and the Corps of Engineers. What they seek to do is change that definition to mean everything, including at a hearing I was at where a woman told me that subsurface water, so it's underground, is now navigable. So that the pool I asked her, the pool that forms under my child's swing set where she drags her feet across as she's swinging, that pool that fills there when it rains, will now allow the EPA and the Corps of Engineers to come onto my ground and regulate what I do. And that's what they seek to do. That is what they seek to do. And just about, today's Thursday, I think it was on Monday, the president signed an act, and we're still trying to figure out what it means about the Chesapeake Bay and our commitment, Pennsylvania's commitment requirement to the Chesapeake Bay. And we're all for cleaning up the bay. We are all for cleaning up the bay. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of politics with that. I was over at the State House when Governor Rendell took a bunch of money from taxes that you pay if you're on a public sewer system to pay for projects all around the state that aren't in the watershed, and didn't do a thing with an issue called legacy sediment, which right now one of the things the EPA is screaming about is all the dirt that's flowed down and eroded off the land for 200 years and is sitting right above the Conowingo Dam. That water used to be, according to them, about 114 feet deep. And it's now about 40 feet deep. And all that dirt that's in there is what they say is destroying the bay. And anytime we have a high water event, it comes out. We tried to impress that upon the DEP and the EPA when I was in the State House. But Governor Rendell wasn't interested. What he was interested in was taxing everybody more that's on a sewer system and then spreading that money around to places. Look, I'm all for cleaning up the bay, but there's a time and a place and a way to do it. And what I'm concerned about right now is what the president has done, I'm concerned about, is going to mean a taking of land in the Chesapeake Bay watershed along the Susquehanna and York County. The federal government will buy by eminent domain land and take it for conservation purposes, and I take some issue with that. And I tell you that not to be an alarmist, but we're trying to get the information because nobody knows exactly what this thing is that he just signed. But I urge you to take a look at the waters of the USA. We passed a bill in the House to stop it, but that's the House. So it goes to the Senate, and that'll be the end of it, okay? Which is why it's so important that we win the Senate back so we at least have a partner to work with. The EPA Clean Air Rule, it's out for comment right now. It's essentially, sorry. I think that might be my phone in her purse. The EPA Clean Air Rule is almost tantamount to cap and trade. It's almost the same thing as cap and trade coming again through EPA rule, what you can't get legislatively. It's going to be dramatic for our employers in this district, and there are some big ones, that literally if they can't comply, will move their operation to Africa or someplace like that because they can. And so we must do what we can to stop it. Do you realize that because of the current regulations and requirements right now, if you remember last winter's polar vortex, the grid. We operate in this thing called the PJM, the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland Interconnect, which schedules all the power to your houses in the whole region. We came in within 0.5% of not having enough power to power the grid. Meanwhile, we are closing down in Pennsylvania, closing them right now, coal-fired power plants, because of these rules. And it's going to continue. And your power is going to go, your price of your power is going to continue to go up because of this. So I urge you to get involved and make comments about it. We will deal with probably the Export-Import Bank. I suggest, or I think it will come in the form of a continuing resolution from the Senate. You must realize that we have a budget in place until the end of the federal fiscal year, which is the end of September. If we're going to keep going, we have to do something. The president's not going to sign a House budget. All right, the Senate and the House aren't going to put anything together that the president's going to sign, but we got to keep going, and they're going to put something in that continuing resolution that they feel is a must-pass, and I would suspect they think it's going to be the Export-Import Bank. So stay tuned on that. We would like to reform it. A lot of us would like to see it go away. I will tell you this as well. Let me be perfectly frank with you. The federal government is involved in too many things, in my opinion, and the Export-Import Bank is one of them. But I would also talk about Fannie and Freddie. I would talk about flood insurance. As a person who's been flooded out of their home as a child, we lived right along the yellow breaches and so on and so forth. I'm not sure getting rid of the Export-Import Bank, lock, stock, and barrel, is the right answer. All right, the things, Fannie and Freddie, are things that happen wholly within our country, and we control them. All right, so should we be in that business? Should the federal government be in the business of underwriting all our mortgages and having the taxpayers share the risk in that? I say certainly not to the extent that they are. Should we be involved in flood insurance? Same thing. It's all within our purview. The thing with the Export-Import Bank is our businesses, and believe it or not, many in York County, many in the 4th Congressional District, compete overseas, and they must compete with governments that own or collaborate in ownership of their enterprises, whether it's nuclear power, whether it's airplane building, or those type of things. And so if we're going to have our businesses right here in York County receive a letter of credit from somebody and compete, that has to come from somewhere. So that's got to be reformed. There are problems with the Export-Import Bank, but I'm not sure shutting it off just like that is the right answer. And I'm not saying I have the right answer, but I've talked to Chairman Henserling about it. One of the problems is that the Congress passed reforms to the Export-Import Bank years ago, and the Export-Import Bank just refuses to implement them, like so many of the bureaucracies of the federal government do. And I think we'd feel better about things if they would implement the reforms that were already made, but they don't. They thumb their nose at us. We can't tell what's happening from their accounting, and we can't tell if we're losing money or making money. We can't tell, and that at least has to end. Let me see. I know you're probably interested, certainly in Iraq. Let me just say this. I can't help myself having served there, but hindsight's 20/20, and it's not just about being critical of the president. But I would just, for students of history, just take you back to Korea, to Japan, to Germany, before I was alive, where Americans spent their blood and their treasure winning the peace, winning the victory, winning the stability. We are still in those places right now. And one of the reasons we're still there is because these societies train their children from a very early age to hate whatever they're hating. And it takes years and years and years to upend that, to change that mindset. We went in and we did that in Iraq, where we secured stability. It was not perfect. It was far from perfect. But it's like planting a seed, out in some stony ground with no cover, and then expecting it to grow and flourish, and walking away from it, not watering it all summer long, and letting the weeds grow up all around it, and then wonder what the heck happened. In my opinion, the president squandered what the American people paid for in their blood, in their treasure, and their credibility. And at some point, if you have not watched, if you have not seen what happens in Iraq and Syria, from the Assad regime and from ISIS, I encourage you, as painful as unpleasant as it is, and it will shock your conscience. All right, it's not like shooting a person from an aircraft or something like that. It is very personal. It is very close when somebody is beheaded in the fashion that they do it. They hold onto the person, just like you would hold and hug someone, and they saw through their neck as the person is visualizing and participating in their own demise at that moment. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't tell you that because I want this to be morbid. I want to tell you that because at some point America has to realize that while we're weary of being at war, we are, and because of some of the things this president has done and some in the past, we can't afford to be at war anymore. But these people are at war with us, and they are not going to stop. And sooner or later, this stuff that we're seeing in the internet and on TV is going to happen right here in this country. And I don't know what's going to take to wake us up and make a commitment. But to me, that 10,000 troops that should have stayed in Iraq would have resolved all of this, and this wouldn't have happened. All right, and it's not to say we can fix everything. Now, what's going to happen now? You know, we passed a resolution in the House to disallow the president to take the actions that he's taken in Iraq. But again, we need two, right? We need a House and a Senate, and you need a presidential signature. He's not going to sign it. The Senate's not going to take it up. So he's going to take these actions based on past statute in Iraq. And how far he's going to go, I don't know. I mean, he ran on ending this thing, and now he's, to me, acting in, quite honestly, exactly for what he despised George Bush for sending troops and meddling in other countries. You know, he wants to meddle in Iraq, and I think he should to a certain extent, but won't meddle in Mexico with a sergeant that's stuck down there, and I don't understand that. But so let me talk to you a little bit about the IRS. We are, Lois Lerner was held in contempt by Congress, and again, we don't have the Senate on our side with that. We're just going to continue. We are not done by a long shot with the IRS. We are going to continue, and I think that you know everything that's out there with the emails and the hard drives and the lies, quite honestly, the lies. We are going to continue to pursue it because we are duty-bound to do it. It's not about conservative organizations or anything like that. It's about using an instrument of power at the federal government to usurp people's rights, whatever their political stripe is. It is unacceptable in America, and we are going to take someone's going to be held accountable at some point, and we're going to find out how far it goes. I will tell you, it's probably going to take the rest of the president's term because they are going to stonewall us at every turn. Fast and furious. If you remember how long ago that's been, just today, a federal judge ordered the Justice Department to provide Congress with a list of the documents we've been asking for since before I was in office, since the very beginning of this administration. It takes the courts this amount of time. The lawsuits are there. They're working their way through. You're going to start seeing some action on some of these past scandals. So Fast and Furious is far from over. We're going to get to the bottom of it. It might take us a while, but we're going to get there. The Select Committee on Benghazi, Trey Gowdy, is working through it right now on his district work period with the members of that committee, Republicans and Democrats, subpoenaing information to get what they're doing is they're reviewing the questions that have been asked, the questions that have been answered, and they're going to fill in the gaps of what we need to know. Where was the president? Who changed the talking points? What was the motivation for the talking points? All right, we already know a lot about it based on emails and so on and so forth. The talking points had nothing to do, the change in the talking points had nothing to do with security. And in my opinion, it was motivated by the upcoming election. But that's my opinion, but I think the facts eventually will bear that out. We are not done with that. Immigration. Of course, like I said, we passed a bill. Now, I'll just give you a little background on that. So we had a bill that was working its way through based on what's currently happening at the border. And Kay Granger, representative from Texas, had led a group of members of Congress to the border to see what was happening and interview folks and so on and so forth, get the facts. She came back, and they put together a set of principles that legislation should be drafted upon. And they were working, I guess it takes a while, which it does, to get this stuff right. So they asked members of Congress, before we saw the legislation, but based on the principles, is this something that you would vote for? They essentially, they whipped us. It's called whipping us. So they whipped us. And so I whipped a lean yes based on the principles with the caveat that I must see the legislation. But generally speaking, what we want to do here is correct. So when I saw the legislation, I had about a day and a half until the vote. All right, when they finally actually drafted the legislation and gave it to members. So we looked through it very quickly, and so I let the leadership staff know that I would be, I'm now from a lean yes to a lean no. And they didn't ask a lot of questions, which led me to believe either they had enough votes to pass it or they didn't have enough votes at all to pass it. It was one or the other when they don't ask any questions of you. On that final day, it was a Thursday, on the floor, we expected to come vote for that, vote on that piece of legislation, and they just called the end of session. And we realized at that moment that we were going to have a vote on immigration. A lot of us went to the floor, myself included, who was a no vote now. and told leadership absolutely cannot leave without making a statement on where we stand to the American people regarding this border situation. And if we stay all of August to do it, then that's what needs to happen. And I'm a no vote. But all the yes votes wanted us to vote for, on the bill so that they could at least vote for something. It wasn't what I wanted, but I would have voted no, but at least we would have had a vote. So we pushed leadership. And I will tell you, when you say, what impact do we have as the Patriots, as the 9/12 Project, as the Tea Party? What impact? That's the impact that you have, because I think in another day, everybody would have left Washington, D.C. Everybody would have just left. And the president was counting on us leaving. And that was a Thursday evening, and we thought, well, we're going to stay all night and work, which they did. And they put something together for Friday, and on Friday, since the president knew, I feel this, he knew we were going to pass something, he had a press conference that said that Congress cannot act. And of course, Congress can't act because the House is not the Congress. House is one house of Congress, but we need the Senate. But he knew the Senate wasn't going to pass anything meaningful at all, and the Senate wasn't going to accept what we were going to send over, because the rumors were already out there about what it was going to be, and we would never accept what the Senate was going to send up, which was just essentially wholesale amnesty. So we put a bill together, and I'll tell you, we spent 2 hours in conference, and all the yes votes for that bill quite honestly derided a lot of the no votes and said, we want to vote on something. If you're going to be no, stand up and tell us why. So towards the end, I said, yeah, I'll be happy to tell you why. So I stood up and I told them why I went from a yes to a no, which was essentially, why is the new legislation, which would be a law, why is it less restrictive than the current law? Aren't we trying to make things better? I gave him some examples, and I said, instead of trying to get the liberals to vote for this bill, why don't we try and get every conservative to vote for the bill? Wouldn't that be better, right? So they hammered this thing out. We all went through it, and we all decided it's pretty darn good. And the really important thing about this is that once you vote for one of these things, we know the Senate's not going to take it up. We know that. This is never going to see the light of day. But in 6 months, after this new election is over, and we decide that we're going to deal with, as the United States government, as a Congress, House and Senate, and a president, with immigration reform, somebody's going to pull out whatever you voted on and say, okay, Perry, this is what we got. You voted on this before, you'd be good to vote for it now. And so if you send sometimes something over that's marginal as opposed to the best you can do, that comes back to haunt you. We want to go in with our best deal up front, because we know sooner or later we're going to be at the negotiating table. And the paradigm for that is that bill we sent over to the Senate, which they hate, which seals the border. Spends what? The president wanted $3.7 billion. There were people that said, we don't want to give the president another dime. We didn't give him any more money. We took some of his money and spent it on the border. We took some of the foreign aid money going to these countries and said, you're going to spend that bringing your people home. That's the kind of stuff we did in the bill. Unfortunately, it's never going to see the light of day, but I will tell you, this movement nationwide is having a very large impact in Washington, D.C. And I will tell you this as well. People say to me, yeah, I hate the Tea Party. They're intractable. They don't agree with anybody. They won't get along with anybody. It's got to be their way or the highway. And I say, listen, these folks are good Americans. They're good citizens concerned about their country. I don't agree with everything. My wife doesn't agree with me on everything, and I don't agree with her on everything. That's okay. I said, but they've been watching compromise for the last 100 years destroy their country, and they're fed up with it. And they can't step back another step, and you must understand that. That's where they are. So what I'd like to do is take some questions, but before I do, let me just say this as well. We've got an election coming up, all right, local elections. We've got some great candidates here. Kate's here, all right, Kristen's here. You might think that, look, they're not 100% of everything I want. Tom Corbett has disappointed me on occasion. You might say that, all right? And you say, well, if I vote for that person, it doesn't get much better, Scott Wagner is the only guy in the room that does everything that I wish he would do, all right? Where's Mike Folmer? He's here somewhere too, right? Mike Folmer's in all right, Senator Folmer's in the room, right? But I will tell you this, you got to remember that what would be great is if all of York County were in this room tonight, but they're not. You're in this room, but the rest of York County is not here. They're out shopping, they're with their kids, they're watching whatever's on TV, on pop culture today, and they are disengaged, they're disaffected, They don't care. They're fed up with it or whatever, but they're going to vote for somebody. They're going to vote for somebody. And all together, we pick our candidates. It may not be the one I want, all right? But at the end of the day, you got to assess who's better. Every day in Washington, D.C., I get a choice between bad or worse than that bad, all right? It's about like this, right? And the elected officials in the room know what I'm talking about. You know, and I say to myself, look, why don't we, instead of doing this, why don't we get rid of Obama phones or something like that? Well, that's not the vote. That's not the vote in front of me. The vote in front of me is this or this. Let's not shoot ourselves in the foot, folks, okay? A lot of us stayed home because we didn't love Mitt Romney. But I would say, do you love Barack Obama? You know, I mean, look, just remember, other folks are voting too, and what's really, really important, not only that you influence your elected officials, because that's important, but that you influence your neighbors. A lot of folks will say to me, why aren't you impeaching the president? He's done this, he's done that, he's done the other thing. All right? High crimes and misdemeanors is really vague, number one. Number two, it's a political solution. But really, really, number three is more importantly, any of that kind of activity comes from here, not here. All right, the upswelling to impeach President Nixon, sure, the Democrats and some Republicans wanted to get him for what they perceived he'd done. But the tidal wave of support for that came from the people, which is why it succeeded. Conversely, Bill Clinton, regardless of what Central Pennsylvania, regardless of what York County thought, we felt like he violated the law because guess what? He did violate the law. It wasn't about sex to us. It was about violating the law. But that's not how the American people outside this place saw it. Conversely, the House impeached him, the Senate didn't convict him, and Bill Clinton is the most popular political figure in America today. All right? So just remember the paradigm, and I will tell you this. Regardless, our candidates have now been selected, all right? And I'm going to be supporting these candidates. I'm going to be supporting these candidates. Here, you know, let's have our fights, all right? Just like at home. You have your fight in your house. You don't take that stuff out on your front lawn for the neighborhood to see, right? You come out together. And I would just urge you to support your candidates because they are good people, all right? They're good people that your community supported, that your community, not just you, and maybe not you, but your community supported them. And we shoot ourselves in the foot when we get some of these other folks a toehold into this thing. You can still influence your candidates, even though they might disagree. I might disagree with you on something. But I guarantee you, when I hear from Stockwell, you know, when I hear from some good buddies with the state police or whatever, I know you people. When I hear from one of my old teachers, believe me, I pay attention. I pay attention because you're my neighbors, and my job is to do what my boss tells me. I got 700,000 of you, though, or a little better than that. So I would love to take some questions. Let me see. Oh boy. All right, I'm going to start right. All right, and just work.
You said old teacher. I'm not that old.
You're older than I am.
Thank you, Scott. You're doing a good job. You certainly have more patience than I've had. Saw several programs on TV over the last year, investigative programs concerning the, I know you mentioned in the town hall meeting, one of the greatest threats to our country is our national debt.
Yeah.
About the gold that we possess in this country. I don't think it's been 50, 60 years since we've seen the gold in Fort Knox. Even their legislators can
Yeah, you can't.
have access to this. Anybody can't hear me? And also, we hold the gold from other countries when other countries want American currency for international trade. Some countries have asked for their gold back in exchange for the money they want to give back, and we are not able to provide that gold. I'm wondering, we the people own that gold, not the government. Is there any way that we can press to see if we do have gold still available in this country? And maybe react to the effect of the danger of not having gold to back our currency, since China is taking tons of gold. I'm sure we're paying China interest on our debt in gold. It's a very scary situation.
Mr. Schwamley, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that would require legislation or if that requires some special request. For instance, I just asked before the recess to see the redacted portions of the 9/11 Commission report. I thought I would just go to the SCIF, which is a secure area, and view it and read it. It's not that simple. I must request, I must be vetted. I have a top secret security clearance from the military before I get to Congress, and they grant you one as a member of Congress, carte blanche. But I'll tell you what, I'll look into it. I would just postulate this. The Fed and the federal government might be concerned about somebody, and I don't know how you would quickly take inventory. Like if you just, let's say that they allowed me or you to go to the vault in Fort Knox and open up and say, okay, Mr. Schwamley, there it is. What do you need to see? I don't know how fast you could count up, and determine how much is there. But there might be a concern if it were common knowledge and public knowledge that there is a deficit there to what we already know that we outprint the value of our gold, right? I mean, is that a shock to anybody in the room? What I guess nobody knows is to what level. And as long as the United States dollar remains the reserve currency, I suspect we don't care. When I say we, the federal government doesn't care. But I'll look into it about what the provisions would be, and I'll get you an answer if I can get one. All right? Yes, sir.
Everything seems to hinge on us the Republicans taking the Senate back this November. My comment is, a month ago I was very happy with the position that we were in. It seemed like we were going to do that, but here recently I have heard a lot about the Libertarian Party starting to cut in and are going to put up candidates and take away votes from the Tea Party and the GOP. I would like to hear your perspective on that. Is there any kind of a caucus that goes on in the Republican Party to discuss those kind of issues, that this is critical, that we take the Senate back in November?
Well, the Republican Party, generally speaking, is very proprietary about, the Republican Party, and it wants Republicans to win. Unfortunately, in my opinion, sometimes, the Republican I would wish would win is not the Republican maybe the establishment or somebody else would wish to win. That having been said, it's a state-by-state issue from when folks can avail themselves to the ballot. There's some late primaries there. Each state sets its own election laws in that regard to when people can get on the ballot. And I suspect that the Libertarian Party, as a party, if it were, or somebody that identifies or affiliates themselves with the Libertarian voting, that even if there's no party, they can just say, look, I'm registered as a Libertarian, and now I'm running for the United States Senate. Nobody can stop that person from doing that, and nor should they. From my perspective, I hope that it helps drive the conversation more to the right or more towards freedom. But I would also hope that it wouldn't empower liberals to be able to win because we're dividing the votes that would traditionally go towards a Republican. Look, if the Libertarian would just win, that would be fine with me as well. What I don't want to see is a liberal win, a liberal Republican or a liberal Libertarian. So we can have conversations about it, but I suspect that you would be as disenchanted with a concerted effort in that regard as we recently saw in Mississippi with that Senate primary, which when you have to count on the other side to get you across the finish line, you wonder which party you're in. I do. If you can't win with your party, then maybe, and not to say that, that I don't ask Democrats to vote for me and Libertarians and people that aren't affiliated with anything, but it's your principles, not your party, that we should be counting on. And so that's kind of my, I would hope that they won't scuttle our efforts because it is critically important. And I want to manage expectations as well, assuming that we can and do win the Senate. If you think that Obamacare is going to be repealed immediately and that all these things that the president has done over the last couple of years is going to change around on a dime, it is not. It is not going to happen. I mean, the president still is not going to sign the full repeal of Obamacare, which, by the way, while ISIS is happening, while the border's happening, while all these things are happening in the United States, Obamacare is still failing at a breathtaking pace right now as we speak, every minute of the day, from revenues to lost information to people that can't get coverage and people that are denied access to care. Still happening all day long, but he is never going to sign that bill in the last 2 years. So let's just be clear about what we're talking about. forcing him to sign bills or veto bills and have a public conversation about policy and the direction of this country in front of the American people. That's what winning the Senate back gets for us. Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly right. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for a nice presentation. My question is in regard to illegal immigration and the aliens that are coming to this country. The president has reached out to charitable organizations to take some of these people. I would like to know what legal right do they have, these charitable organizations, to take these people who might then influence my tax base, because these children or illegals will have to be sent to school, will require medical care, which will have to be paid out of taxpayer dollars. What legal right do they have to take these children and impose a burden on myself or other taxpayers?
So and this might be trying to thread through all the different policy, but essentially the purview of immigration is the federal government. So the federal government, via either the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, or HHS, through regulatory requirement, also passed by the Congress, House and Senate over years, different layers of regulation have determined that the federal government can house, can deal with, adjudicate these individuals, and there are certain provisions like the 2002 rule that allows these people from these other countries other than Mexico, so that they have to be dealt with in 72 hours and then given a hearing on their status in America at some point in the future. The long story short is that the federal government has purview of it and is contracting with these not-for-profit or charitable organizations who the federal government has reached out to, and the charitable organizations have reached out to the federal government when they understand the situation, and they're collaborating to make this happen. And so when you say what's standing, because under the Constitution, the federal government has a purview and has established laws in that regard, whether or not I agree with them. Right.
Illegals, and I have to pay the taxes in that community?
Yes.
Well, then my suggestion is once we find out that these charitable organizations are doing this, don't give them any money. It's simple. And I don't care what religion they are, or I don't give money to Salvation Army. I love the organization, but I will not give them money because they do this kind of thing, and it leaves my rights out of the whole situation.
To kind of continue with the conversation, in the cases where the state governments have sought to remedy the situation for expressly the reason that you've enumerated, because it's their tax dollars and it's their taxpayers that are imposed upon it, and particularly the border states, the southern border states like Arizona, those things have been upheld in the courts. When I say those things have been upheld, the federal government's position has been upheld in the face of the state government passing a law which would establish exactly what you want. So the state governments have said, look, the federal government's not doing its job, we'll do it. And the federal government takes it to the court, and the court sides with the federal government, which is what's happened, you're going to see more of it. We know of 4 locations in Pennsylvania right now that are taking illegals in. They stay there for a period of time, and then they're moved to their destination, whether it's family relation, a sponsor, or foster care, and then immediately, by U.S. statute, have right to come to our schools, which they will. And it's not to say that these individuals that are coming to Pennsylvania will continue to reside in Pennsylvania, but it's also not to say that somebody in Utah that is detained for a period of time at one of these charitable facilities or otherwise, once that period's over, won't come to Pennsylvania, because they will. And quite honestly, we have asked, and we continue to ask these questions of DHS, of ICE, of HHS about the specifics. The most recent thing I got, and the only thing really I got that concrete, was a number coming to Mechanicsburg and a contract amount. That's all they will tell us. We can't get the information about where they're going. And yes, ma'am. One moment, please. There's one in Cumberland County, the Lutheran home, a Methodist home, I'm sorry. There is one in Berks County I think there's one in Bucks. Oh, I just had it here. I'll tell you what, stick around, I will find it. I've got it here, but I can't find it at the moment. I just read it. I have the exact locations. And to be candid with you, we've met and talked with the location in the 4th District. We've asked them who they've spoken with. How did they get the information? How did this happen? What are the metrics? How do we know the physical status? What are the ages of these? We've asked all the questions that you would normally ask because we know that you're going to call saying, what the heck's going on? We can get very little information about any of the specifics. You get to know how many are coming and the average stay. So it's not they just come, this individual, John, comes from El Salvador and he goes to the Methodist home and he's here until he leaves and goes back to El Salvador. That's not how this works. John comes from El Salvador. He goes to Methodist home until he is placed with a sponsor, a family member, a foster parent, what have you, and then he waits to find out his status via a hearing, which can take up to 3 to 5 years, and which habitually, oh, you have him? By the way, I'm remiss. My chief of staff is here, and it's really important that I recognize her and point her out to you because my operation, the operation you pay for would not run at all without a great chief of staff, and I say that. Thank you. Her name is Lauren Mugley. She's got like 30 years legislative experience at both the state and federal level, also a lieutenant colonel in the military. And, you might have saw me. I was driving her car on the way in, and I dropped her off up front because she's very delicate, like a snapping turtle, but not to constituents, all right? But please, let them know where.
Okay. One of 4. United Methodist Home in Mechanicsburg, Bethany Children's Home in Berks County, Kids Peace in Bethlehem, and Holy Family. Ooh, so sorry. I'm not usually so quiet. Do you want me to do that again? Wait. See, now I'm very simple. I just lost my spot now. Kids Peace in Bethlehem and the Holy Family Institute in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County.
Okay, so those are the 4 locations currently in Pennsylvania. All right. Yes, sir.
I guess I get a little concerned when I hear a representative of the United States ask for information and he isn't given it. It just seems a little scary.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I must tell you, this is a small example. This happens on a daily basis. I have asked hundreds and hundreds of questions at hearings and so on and so forth. Most recently, regarding the immigration situation on the border, I asked Secretary Johnson very specific questions about a contract that was offered in February regarding the escort of these immigrants coming into the country, where in the past it was about 5,000, maybe a little more, and all of a sudden we were looking for escorts for 70,000 people in February of these minors. And so I held the contract up in front of him at the hearing, and I said, I need you to explain how this came about. Like, who did the metrics? How did you come about this need? And how did you come about the cost and so on and so forth? And he said, I'm unfamiliar. And I said, well, I'm going to have these questions for you in writing, Mr. Secretary, and I want your word here in front of the American people, on camera, on record, that you're going to answer these questions. And I was very specific, and I named the contracting individuals' names on the contract to him. So it couldn't be, well, I don't know who did this or what the person, I named them on national TV, and he said, I always endeavor to answer Congress's questions, and we haven't seen a thing since. And we might never see a thing. We ask questions on a very regular basis, and well, we did ask that question as well. So we asked on behalf of the state about these immigrants coming to the state, because this is our state. We're going to have to pay taxes for school, for medical, for for all kinds of things. We want to know. So the answer we were given was, we'll tell you how many are coming, but where they're going and their disposition is none of your business. That's what we were told.
Remember, this is the most transparent government of all time.
Yes, sir.
I've heard numbers that each child or person coming up pays $5,000 to get from where they're coming to where they're going. If you're talking 70,000, That's what, $350 million? Where are they getting $350 million in these poor countries to come here?
It's a fascinating question. So we've heard, and listen, I don't know, okay? I haven't talked to any of these individuals, but we've heard anything from $5,000 to $8,000, maybe even more. They bring these folks. Where are they getting the money? You know, El Salvador, pretty poor country. Honduras, if you've ever been there, I've been there with the military, pretty poor country. They don't have $5,000 or $8,000, but you know who does? The workers from El Salvador and Honduras and Mexico that are working in this country are sending it there. And these young children, oh, by the way, well, let's talk about that a little bit too, but these children or these minors that are coming to meet some family member, generally speaking, in many, many, many cases, it's somebody that's here illegally right now, and they're coming to be reconnected with that person. So we're really supporting illegal immigration upon legal immigration. And when we say children, you must realize that 75% of these children are 15 years or older, and of those, over 70% are male. And of those people, the numbers we're talking about, whether it's 70,000, 90,000, or whatever, that's 15%. That number is 15% of what's coming across the border. 85% are not minors coming across the border. 85%. So if you look at what 70 or 90,000 is, that's 15% of the problem coming across the border right now. So, Mr. Stockwell.
Let's go with just two more.
Sure.
I have two questions for you, Scott, and I'll ask them together or separately, however you want. The first question is this. All in this room have heard about the possibility and the idea that because the House of Representatives, all money legislation and the operation of the federal government comes from the House.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility, or what are your thoughts about the possibility of cutting purse strings to agencies that are not giving you information, not being cooperative, et cetera?
And Bill, we do it on a daily basis in D.C. I mean, we do it on literally a daily basis, just that. But we need to be clear about our civics here. So when people say Congress has the power of the purse, they're right. Revenue generation bills, spending bills emanate from the House of Representatives by constitutional mandate. That's where they emanate from. You still must get the Senate to vote on something, right? We send a package. The House just doesn't say, okay, Senate's not voting on something, Mr. President, here it is. It has to get together with the Senate and then get a signature. The Senate doesn't take any of them up. The President not only won't sign them, but doesn't even have to discuss them with the American people because they never come to his desk, which is why it's so vital. I'm not saying I'm going to agree with everything the Senate does. As typically, the Senate has a longer view of thing. It covers a wider area. Senators are elected from states. That's a different story altogether with that amendment. But they see things differently, and generally speaking, they're not as conservative as I'd like them to be. But we can get nowhere in the conversation without them when Harry Reid just throws it in the trash can as soon as we send it over, which is why it's so important to have a Senate that's going to put something together, not that I will love, but that maybe I can accept and put it on the president's desk. And what Mitch McConnell has been telling people, I just read this last night, is that the plan, assuming he's the leader of the Senate, whatever you think of him, would be to, every time we send bills to the president, we as a Congress would send collaboratively bills to the Senate, it will have spending cuts and reining in of executive authority, and the president will either have to choose to veto or sign, and in some cases shut down the federal government based on his inaction on legislating, on signing the bill.
Okay, my second question has to do with something I know that's close to your heart, and that's EMP.
Yeah.
What in this room can we do after your explanation to try to help you in dealing with this situation?
Okay, so EMP, electromagnetic pulse, can happen either naturally occurring from the sun or by a nuclear weapon or just an EMP weapon. It's very concerning based on the scale of it, and the probability of it happening from the sun, quite honestly, is the biggest issue. And I don't want to get too much in the technicality of it, but it requires hardening of the grid, which is actually fairly inexpensive in the grand scheme of the federal government, but it would require us to have the power companies require them to do the hardening. I would say what you can do is call your friends and neighbors around the country and have them advocate for some of the bills that are out there and some funding mechanism to pay for it, either through small bit of higher energy bills, but it is going to cost. Somebody's going to have to pay, or repatriation of funds or whatever. There's a couple different vehicles out there, but to educate people, because most people have no idea. We missed a major EMP event in the United States by about 2 days based on our orbit around the sun, where there was a solar flare. And what I'm talking about, in case you're not aware, just do some reading on it, but on a wide scale, on a large scale like that, it would destroy the electricity grid in the United States or any country, or potentially the world, where the solar flare, where the solar storm came, where it hit the globe, such that it would not be able to be repaired, and like you would have no electricity to generate to fix the parts that were broken to get the electricity running. And what they're talking about is up to 90% mortality rate for the human race. Like if it hit the United States, you must know certain things like all the transformers coming out of whether it's Peach Bottom, whether it's 3 Mile Island, whether it's Bruner's Island, all those major transformers would be destroyed in an EMP. All of them are custom made overseas. There's not one made in America, and each one is custom made for that site. And if that's gone, there will be, and look, if it's just one town, not a big deal, right? We'll buy a transformer somewhere else, or we'll backfeed power somehow. But if it's half the country or the whole country, think about people, especially in urban centers, they won't last very long. One more? Do I get one more? Yep. Amanda?
Just give a quick summary of your medical marijuana bill.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for asking. So the medical marijuana bill, I have to get past some stigmas, but it is not legal. First, let me say what it isn't. It is not wholesale or really legalization of marijuana, all right? That's what it is not. There is a derivative of the marijuana plant called CBD. Cannabidiol is the name, but they call it CBD for short. It is an extract in the form of an oil. And people that have epilepsy in particular, that have these seizures, generally young kids, because most people that have these severe seizures don't last until old age. Because of the seizures, they don't develop and they don't live that long. This has been shown to stop the seizures. Right now, these young children take all kinds of drugs prescribed by doctors that are legal, that have horrendous side effects and do almost nothing to stop the seizures. And I've seen these kids, and they've come in and they've said, look, if we could just take this extract from this plant that you cannot get high from, that you don't smoke, you take it in a teaspoon or an eyedropper in your mouth and you swallow it, and we're taking seizures from the level of 300 a week in a child down to maybe a couple a month or less, or no seizures at all. But it is illegal at the federal level because it is a Schedule I narcotic, all right? So my legislation seeks to move that CBD, that oil, and the plant associated with it, which does not get you high. The plant has been engineered and cloned to have such a low level of THC. THC is the stuff in marijuana that makes people high. This has a very low level. It allows that to be legalized at the federal level and then regulated at the state level. And if you want a paradigm for what this legislation would do, think about, generally speaking, alcohol. Legal at the federal level, but the states would administer how it's licensed, how it's sold, how it's certified, were there pesticides used, what's the level of it, how much you can buy. It leaves everything else up to the states, but allows these kids to not have to, these families, what they're doing, many of them, because it is legal in Colorado. And I'm not advocating for the way Colorado did it, because right now Colorado flies in the face of the federal government's prohibition on marijuana. But that having been said, Colorado did it, and we have Pennsylvania families and families in this district that take their child, one family member moves to Colorado so that they can give the child the CBD so they can stop having the seizures. And it just seems to me that that's a case where the federal government is in the way of something that's natural. All right? There are no known side effects to CBD, no known side effects, but these drugs that they're taking, I can list a whole raft of drugs that you're familiar with the names of that have horrific side effects, and that's what they prescribe to these children to no effect. Meanwhile, they can't get this thing that comes naturally from a plant. They're not looking for any money. They're not looking for the federal government to pay for anything. As a matter of fact, most of these children are on Social Security. It would take them off that, because they wouldn't have to have the medication. So that's what the legislation seeks to do. I personally think it's the right thing to do as a father of children, that if I had my kids were afflicted with that, I would be very upset with my federal government that was standing in the way of the treatment of my child. So listen, I appreciate your time. I'm going to stick around. I want to hear what everybody else has to say. I'm going to stick around afterwards for questions you may have. A great audience. I appreciate your interest in your country. Thank you.
And I completely forgot about the medical marijuana thing for seizures. My daughter has Down syndrome, and she also has autism and seizures. She takes pills. It affects her differently. It's so, the amount of the pills that we have to go through and try to figure out what dose does what for her, it's a strain. It's really difficult. And you don't know what's in the drugs. You truly don't. If we had that as an alternative, I would definitely try that for my daughter. Thanks again, Congressman Perry. In June, the York County Republican Committee had a reorganization meeting to elect a new chairman and vice chairman for the next 4 years. Alex Shorb and Allison Blue, they ran a great campaign. Their meet and greets, I am a committee member. I went to their meet and greets. I've talked to them. I'm pretty confident that we're going to have some good changes here in the next 4 years. Chairman Shorb is here to talk about the future of the committee, and afterwards he'll take a few questions. So, Chairman Shorb.
All right. I probably shouldn't do this, but I actually had a question for Congressman Perry, and I'm going to start with that and put him on the spot while I can. It seems to me that a lot of what's being done right now is being done by executive order. Are you confident that if a Republican wins the next presidential race, that a lot of these items that you mentioned this evening can be reversed?
So just to be clear, a lot is being done by executive order, and to be fair, the president has actually enacted fewer executive orders than many of his predecessors. Executive orders can be overturned immediately upon a new executive who just changes it. One of the problems is the act of the executive order, what it produces, can't be overturned. So if we're talking about work visas and work permit, legalizing 9, 7, 5 million illegal immigrants, while a new executive can change the order, it won't change the status of those individuals once they're changed over. They will effectively be United States citizens. And just to clarify a little further, the lawsuit that the Republican conference has enjoined with the president is regarding exactly that. We don't begrudge him the ability to take executive action because it is within his purview. I would say a place to do it would be with the VA, and it's interesting that he doesn't take any executive action there. But in 3 particular cases, his executive action must withstand the scrutiny of the court. And the 3 cases are immigration, the tantamount legalization of marijuana by refusal to faithfully discharge the law, and by his Obamacare, by not enforcing certain things at certain times concurrent with the law. The lawsuit is going to focus on the Obamacare, on the ACA component of it, because it has the best chance of winning. It is a blatant disregard for his oath of office and the purview of his executive power. He is not to legislate. You can't just willy-nilly say the speed limit's going to be 55 or 65 on a date certain, and then the Congress says that, you sign the bill with the president, and then the president just says, well, I don't like that date. I'm going to make it earlier. I'm going to be later. You can't do that. But he has done that, and to be further clear, no other president in history, no other executive orders, all kinds of them, no other president in history has done that, and that's why there was a lawsuit.
Well, thank you. And really what I was getting at is, it's discouraging to hear a lot of the things that this president is doing. And, I'm really after a little bit of optimism in this whole thing, and hopefully, we can get the ball rolling in the right direction, which kind of gets into my remarks this evening. And I'll kind of dovetail off of what Congressman Perry spoke about with my own twist towards the Republican committee. I better be careful. I didn't realize it was this difficult, but all right. This section actually will be the lighter part of the evening. You know what? Do you think it's my cell phone?
It might be, but I just unplugged that.
Here, let me give you. Oh. Thanks. This is intended to be the lighter section part of the evening. I really want to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about the committee, and then also discuss the importance of the Corbett campaign. For those of you who don't know me, I am a lifelong York County resident. My parents were York County residents. My father went to York Catholic. My mom went to York Suburban. My sister went to York Catholic, and I went to York Suburban. So if you guys can figure that out, we have a little in-house rivalry when it comes to basketball games here in town. Anyway, I want to give you a little background. My first job out of college, I started on the floor of the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange primarily trades regional stocks, but they have a separate section which is the options exchange, options being calls and puts. I was on the options exchange, and if you've ever seen, really, you don't see them on TV as much anymore, but they're the option pits. You know, the traders are in their jackets, you know, there's yelling, screaming, hand signals, that's all, it's all that. That's where I got my start. It was high-paced, it was fun. But I tell you that story because when I got my first paycheck, I was obviously living in Philadelphia, expenses were high. I looked through it and I saw all the items that I had to pay. And I looked at, there's a gross pay and there's a net pay. And that's an eye-opener. But at that point, it got me thinking. It said, you know, we're paying a lot of money, you know, and where is it going? Is it being spent as well as it should be spent? And you know, should we be looking at things differently and doing more? I'll go back to that in a little bit. From Philadelphia, I then started with Merrill Lynch here in York. I worked for Merrill for a period of time and really felt that the best place for me was to start my own company. So I started my own company 5.5 years ago, and it has been a wonderful experience. But again, I look at the situation and say, you know, we're paying a lot of taxes and we have a lot of fees and we have a lot of regulations passed down on us. And, you know, can it be done better? And you know, that, again, that's part of the impetus to why I am here today. So through all that, I just want to say, well, I'll stop with my personal life there, but I want to now turn to the committee. Some of the things that we've done is we came into a very difficult situation. I have met with numerous committee people, numerous community individuals who are passionate about the Republican Party. I am encouraged by the sense that I get from everybody. The good thing is everybody is willing to work together at this point. And I did not know how everything was going to shake out, particularly after the election and the first few days that I was there. But we came in, we looked at the situation and said, okay, what needs to be done? We first looked and said, okay, we have an executive committee. It's 24 people. Believe it or not, 11 of those individuals were over the age of 70. So from a demographic standpoint, we needed to reshape that a little bit. And I don't want to say that we wanted to throw everyone out, just the opposite. We said, isn't it wonderful that we have so many people over the age of 70, and isn't it great that we're able to work with them? But in that light, it was my idea to create a director emeritus position. So we're thanking them for their service, we're keeping them engaged, but more importantly, we are reshaping the committee to add additional voices, additional opinions, and a little youth and liven it up with really what I think are going to be the driving forces of the Republican Party going forward. To that light, Ed Mundorf didn't tell you, but he is a committee person. He is also an executive committee member at this point, and we're very thankful to have you on board and all the insight that you've offered and time thus far. So thank you. A few of the other things that aren't noticeable right now that we've been working on are strengthening the internal controls of the organization. We came in, we looked and said, again, you know, I run my business, and you know, we had some attorneys look at things and say, we can really create a better organization, and the idea being that anyone who comes into that role, chairman and vice chair, that is, will be able to pick it up from day one. And you know, we're Republicans, and let's create the best party for the entire county. We are in the process right now of creating district captains. Many of you will receive mailers on that, and I want to make something a little clear to people. We have not chosen district captains as of right now. We are inviting anyone who is interested to get involved in the process. My general feeling is I'd like to see a little competition for those positions. Who's willing to give the time? Who can coordinate people in their precinct, along with working with the elected representatives in their districts. So stay tuned for more on that. The final thing that we're working on right now is strengthening our volunteer base. And if you're thinking an ask is coming out to everyone in the room, it will. So stay with me here. I'm going to go back to a little bit more about myself and why I got involved in politics, and particularly interested in being chairman of this committee. You know, I listen to Congressman Perry, and I become upset because I look at the state of affairs. Not up with you. I think you're doing a great job, but I no. I look at the state of affairs in our country right now, and I become really worried because, to me, it seems as though we're moving to the left just a little bit every day, and it's slow, it's marginal, but you know, I kind of make the point that if you look at a Democrat 50 years ago, well, heck, he'd probably be a Republican today, and you know, the Democrats have shaped the argument, and they have moved the ball forward. It is time we stop moving that ball forward and we start standing up for good, solid American principles. I also become infuriated because, to me, it seems as though there's a total disregard for the Constitution right now. If we keep it simple and go back to what the Constitution says, it is a wonderful document. That tells you all you need to know, and I think most of our problems can be solved if simply we adhere to that. So really, if we get things moving in the right direction, it starts in York County. It starts in Cumberland County. It starts in Adams County. Hopefully I can be a small part in that. I'm going to get into another separate section right now, but you know, here we are in America, but we have to be aware that states are in competitive situations. And I think this speaks to the governor's race coming up. You know, raising taxes is not the answer. We need to keep taxes low, because if we continually raise taxes, what's going to happen? The individuals who are paying the most taxes, they're going to move out. And the reason is they can afford to move out. Again, our state needs to stay competitive. If not, you're going to see more companies domiciled in Delaware. And the point I'm making here is we need to introduce the term adverse selection. And a simple example of that is Detroit. The people who can afford to get out will get out. And what's left are middle class holding the bill for the rest of the people. And we can't afford to have that happen in Pennsylvania. We can't afford to have that happen in the United States. So I think it's important that we don't condemn people for making money. You know, our objective is to create an environment where people have an equal shot, and we need to applaud people who create jobs and are willing to take the risk. So with that, let me get a little bit more into the details of the way I see the Corbett election shaking out. If you look at the Republican, if you look at York County, we have 450,000 York counties. We have 130,000 registered Republicans. There are 97,000 registered Democrats. The problem is that gap is closing. If you think back to York County, when it switched from being under Democratic control to Republican control, it was about 1980. Can anyone think what was going on in 1980? Thank you. It was Ronald Reagan. People moved because of Ronald Reagan. If you look at the trends in York County, the trend, Democrats have been on the upswing since President Obama. It's pure and simple. He is a figurehead and people are going to follow him. My fear in the state of Pennsylvania is if Tom Corbett loses, there is another figurehead in place that people will follow. And we can't afford that to happen. The other component of this is, think of the state of Pennsylvania. You have Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and it's all depending on where you're sitting, I guess, but I'm trying my best. But you have Philadelphia and Pittsburgh that are largely under Democrat control. There's nothing we can do about that. It's the middle of the state that drives the Republican Party. Again, if Tom Corbett is not successful come November, money and resources will be devoted to York County to try to convert it and switch it back under Democrat control. If that happens, it's almost goodbye to the state. Other counties in the area will follow, and I am very worried about the state of Pennsylvania if that were to happen. So one of the things I'm asking from everybody tonight, and this is a little easier than the ice bucket challenge, but go out and explain to people the importance York County holds in this election. Voter turnout is going to be a big deal for us. If each one of you can go to 5 people and say, look, York County could be the swing in this whole thing, and if we don't do this, York County is in jeopardy of turning into a blue county. We can't afford that to happen. So that really is my call to action to everyone tonight. Please stress the importance of this. Get people out. Talk to people who you normally wouldn't speak to, and tell them that this is not about Tom Corbett for 4 years. This is potentially 8 years that we are not going to have property tax reform, pension reform, all the things that we care about that should be getting done. They will most likely not happen for 8 years. And the question you have to ask yourself is, can we afford 8 years of that? Again, we're in a competitive situation with other states. I'm not so sure Pennsylvania can withstand that. So with that, I will take a few questions, but I also want to let you know that I'll be around afterwards, and what I'd like from you is if anyone is willing to volunteer for Republican efforts or also the Corbett campaign. We have 2 people from the Corbett, well, we have 1 person from the Corbett campaign here tonight. Her name is Savannah Beeler. Please introduce yourself to her after the meeting as well. They're going to need everyone in this room to help. So with that, yes, sir.
I'm not all that familiar with the GOP committee. Could you tell me how many members there are and what gender makeup and race makeup the committee is?
Sure. I'm not going to be able to give you exact numbers, and I apologize. I should be able to do that. Right now, there are roughly 270 committee people. There are roughly 320 openings. There is a position for a man and a woman for every ward. Race. As far as demographic makeup, I don't know. Of the 270 odd people, is that what you're asking? I don't have the demographic break. Right. It is. It is primarily Caucasian made up. Thank you. We one of our executive committee team. His name is George Margettis. He will be heading up the outreach program. We have several ways to go about the outreach program. The old way of thinking was go after the city. That is one component of bringing more people in. However, there are as many minorities in all of York County that we need to pay attention to as well. So I want to make sure that effort isn't solely focused in the city, but really addressed on a countywide basis. Yes.
We have a Republican governor, we have a Republican House, we have a Republican Senate, and we got nothing done. Liquor stores, pension reform, property tax, and on and on and on.
Well, we didn't have Senator Wagner before that. No. There is an issue with lobbies. Yeah. Perfect. But it does have to do with the composition of the makeup of the Senate, and people who you think are elected Republicans are voting more for their constituents than they are to uphold the state constitution. It leaves us that we need to continue to elect conservative, strong leaders to all of our elected offices. Right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I have a question for you. You said the Constitution's very important. Are not local laws and state laws just as important?
I would defer to our U.S. Constitution first, but that does by no means says that we don't pay attention to our state or local laws as well.
All right, then. One of the problems I have with the past Republican Party in York County, and I expect to see something different with you, is when I get the comment from the people in that committee that that's not on our agenda. That's wrong. That's why you're losing Republican voters, because they are disgusted. Nobody's standing up and saying, hey, you're a Republican, you play by the rules, and you give the taxpayers what they elected you to do. I live in a township that to file a complaint, it's almost impossible to get anything done. Now, this goes on everywhere. I know it's on the townships around me because I hear from other people complaining about the same problem. But it all goes back to your office and your predecessors. I took one of the issues to the district attorney, and I gave him the facts, the proof. And he looked at me, Tom Kearney looked at me and said, that's not on my agenda. I don't have that in my budget. The Constitution says you're supposed to support the laws of the Commonwealth. You didn't abide by it.
Fair point. And
I expect you, as a committee, and the rest of them, want our endorsement, and get out of the endorsements during the primary. Let the people make the endorsements, and then you support the endorsement.
Fair point. And I will have I will have my business cards out front. And if those issues come up, feel free to call me or email me. Yes.
And Alex, what is one of the reasons that you ran to be the committee chair? Is because you're against the pre-primary endorsement.
Absolutely it is.
Why you saw a problem within the Republican Party, and this is why you ran with the hopes of changing it or leveling the playing field for all Republican candidates to participate.
Absolutely. We certainly need to do that. I will add, it is difficult because all we want to do is create a fair playing field for everyone. If you hold elected office, the expectation is that you come and debate and share what you've done and you be held accountable. During the primary process, I don't want to have any preferential treatment or seem as though I sway towards any particular candidate. Primaries are hugely important, and let's let the voters decide. And then after the primaries, we put that beside us and support, you know, whoever comes out of that. But thank you. All right. Given the interest of time, I know Senator Wagner's in the room, and I'd like him to make. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Ed, but I know he happens to be next or close on the agenda. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, what he said. Senator Wagner, would you like to come up? Should have just left him finish it.
Sorry, Mike, we're not going by the alphabets. We're going backwards. Okay. Okay, I'm going to make this real quick because I know we're moving on time here. A couple quick comments. We talked, Alex was up here. I've known Alex for over 10 years. Alex is a good, sincere person, and he is going to do what is right for the Republican Party committee here in York County. They walked into a tremendous mess the afternoon of the election. The office was basically cleaned out. I mean, it was a real shaft job. They've had to pull together and do a lot of things. I've known Alex, again, for over 10 years. He's a good guy. I consider him a close friend. I've known his family, the Shorb family. Jack and Tom Shorb are attorneys at Stock and Leader. The family owns businesses around town. This is a very needed change, and I can assure you that Alex and the committee that's been put together will do the right thing, and I can assure you of that. A couple quick things, and then I'm going to move into my stuff. Tom Corbett, it is very important that Tom Corbett get reelected. Okay? I have taken Corbett to task over the last 3.5 years. If you've gotten my emails, I've been very critical of a lot of things that he has done. Tom Corbett has done a lot of things, and he's done a lot of good things, but he's surrounded himself with very weak people. He had a terrible communications coordinator who was a total idiot, okay, and he finally got rid of him. The guy's name was Kevin Harley. In Harrisburg, everybody knew he was bad, and it took Corbett too long to get rid of the guy. But I can tell you right now, you take this to the bank. Since May 21st, since the primary, Tom Wolf has taken over $2 million in union money. I have a picture of Tom Wolf holding his hands at a rally. Right hand, Rick Bloomingdale, the president of the AFL-CIO union. Frank Snyder, the treasurer of the AFL-CIO. They own this guy right now, okay? So I will tell you right now, I'm in Harrisburg. I've been there for 5 months. Tom Wolf gets elected. Nothing is going to happen for 8 years, and you're going to hear that from me every single time I come out. Take that to the bank. It is very important. Jason, my chief of staff in the back, we call Mike Barley, who is Corbett's campaign manager, at least 3 to 5 times a week. We are beating the crap out of the guy. In fact, I had to leave earlier because I had to take a call for him because I had another suggestion. We've had Corbett in York. He needs to be visible. The guy's not warm and fuzzy. We're working on it, but I can tell you right now, spread the word, because the unions, as I tell you, the unions, and you're going to hear this in my remarks, they have control of Harrisburg, and if Tom Wolf gets elected, they're going to move into the Capitol, they're going to build bonfires in the Rotunda, and that's where they're going to sleep, okay? I'm telling you right now, if you don't believe me, just watch. So tell your friends. Tom Wolf is a nice guy, but I'll tell you, the unions own him. He doesn't know what has happened to him. So take that to the bank. Scott, I want to mention, your efforts in Washington. This is the best congressman we've had in 30 years. He's got backbone, and he's got courage. And you know what? I want you to tell people the morbid facts, because the execution that took place this week is reality. This guy served in the armed forces, and he was over in the Middle East, and he saw what was going on. You talk about being an alarmist. Continue to be an alarmist, because you need to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. America is hearing too much of American Idol crap. This guy has lived it, and he's doing a very good job. I'll tell you the risk with Scott Perry. If the Democrats come out in waves in Harrisburg City and in York City, this guy loses. So I'm telling you, hit the street and tell your friends they've got to vote for Scott Perry. Surprise, surprise to me, we lost Jeff Picola's seat in the Senate because in the last election, we have Rob Teplitz, who's a Democrat. I'm very intrigued what happened up there. The Democrats came out in Harrisburg City to vote for Barack Obama in this last presidential election, and that's how we lost the Republican seat up there. So there's a lot at risk here. We have to come out strong. And I'll tell you that if York County Corbett doesn't win York County, he's not winning. And it's critical in this county. So I'll tell you, I have beat up on Corbett more than anybody, and I'll continue to do it, but I'm going to vote for the guy. And, I'm going to make a difference in Harrisburg and help him with the team. A couple other things. I want to mention that my goal is to work with Scott and other members of the delegation. Kristen, Kate, you're here tonight. We can become a very strong delegation in York County, but it's taking time, and we're building the right team. So let's go on to a couple quick items, and I'm going to get out of here real fast. I put a paper on everyone's chair tonight, or Amanda, and this has to do with school taxes. I think a lot of people think that I have abandoned the school tax effort because I'm chasing prevailing wage. I'm chasing paycheck protection, sales tax, and pension reform. This chart shows you that these items are all connected together. If we don't get these items, it's not property tax. I'm fighting more fires than a one-armed paper hanger at a firefighting contest. And I'll tell you that my office is very busy. I've been, last evening, I attended a York County Drug Task Force meeting with the District Attorney's Office in a room full of people. We have a heroin epidemic in York County. We have a prescription drug, in Pennsylvania, it's really across the country, we have a prescription drug problem. There are issues. I've seen death penalty people in my office. I've seen the gift of life people. I had a woman whose son was killed in a car accident. Her son at age 20 gave 6 organs. There's an issue between coroners releasing bodies, and the time period is very critical. So we are exceptionally busy in my office, and I know, Scott, probably you're very busy. But I felt it important to put this out, that I'm fighting a lot of fights, and I'm not going to walk away from 76. But every now and then, you got to figure out how to skin the cat another way. Prevailing wage is the bottom line is, if we eliminate school tax, we have to find $11 billion somewhere. And we have to find it. And these are areas you can find it. So let me give you a recap of my five months in Harrisburg, and I'm going to do it real quickly and as fast as possible. The end of this month, I'll be in the Senate for 5 months. And here's an answer to your question why nothing's getting done. We have 27 Republican senators. A month ago, 5 of them, 5 Republicans, were endorsed by the AFL-CIO union. They are not Republicans. They are Democrats sitting on our side of the aisle. Okay, that's the problem. We are putting together a chart showing our Senate Majority Leader. His name is Dominic Pileggi. Dominic Pileggi predominantly takes most of his money from unions. He has turned around and given 2 of the endorsed Republicans $50,000 each, Tommy Tomlinson and John Rafferty, down in the Southeast. That's our problem. I am actively working a Senate race out in Washington County in the western part of the state to help gain another Republican seat. There are 3 other races. We need between 4 and 6 more Republicans to make up for the 5 cowards that I call them that are sitting on my side of the aisle. That's the problem. And, I'm going to call it the way I see it. So what are the problems in Harrisburg? Number one, I have a whole list here. There are lack of relationships. People don't know each other. And there's so many people that have personal agendas. It's all about their district and screw the rest of Pennsylvania. I'm sorry for the language, okay? Right now in the House, it's all about re-election. House members, they try to do something in the first 6 months, and the last 18 months they spend their time on re-election and fundraising. It's a very bad system. Egos. We have a situation, a prescription drug bill potentially in the House and the Senate, that they're both good bills and they need to be passed. But the senator and the House member each want their bill to go to the governor. But meanwhile, people are dying. I mean, this crap's got to stop. And so it's like, my name's got to be on the bill. That's really important. Now, I thought we were all on a team here. That's what's made me successful as team. I will tell you, lack of knowledge is a huge issue, and there's a high learning curve in Harrisburg. And I will tell you right now, if I go to Harrisburg tomorrow, I can walk the halls of Harrisburg, and I guarantee you, 99% of the time, I cannot find a Wall Street Journal in the Capitol. They read the Philly paper, they read the Pittsburgh paper, the USA Today, or the Patriot. I read the Wall Street Journal every day because it's got world events. World events affect this country nationally affect this state. And that's an amazing thing to me. I will tell you that many of the House and Senate members that are elected, I wouldn't hire them to sweep my truck shop, okay? Many of the staffers are in Harrisburg calling the shots. And I will tell you right now, there are staffers looking at me saying, this guy will be gone in 8 years and I'll be here for 30. He's just passing through. And seriously, that's an attitude. There are 2,600 staffers for 253 legislators. The influence of the lobbyists, and Kristen and Kate, this is where you're going to get sucked in, and I hope you have the courage not to get sucked in. There are over 2,000 lobbyists. Every night, 7 nights a week, 52 weeks a year, I could go somewhere and have cocktails on a lobbyist, okay? I could have dinner, a great dinner. I'm talking filet, steak, anything I wanted on a lobbyist. I could stay afterwards, have after-dinner drinks, smoke cigars on a lobbyist. The influence is so bad, it's terrible. If you get my emails, the email that I sent out last week about a lobbying firm called Long Nyquist and Dennis Owens' ABC 27 interview, it explains what the problem is in Harrisburg. The culture. I walk the halls. My name is Scott Wagner. I grew up on a farm. I started shoveling horse manure, okay? People call me senator all the time. When people come to my office, I ask them, please call me Scott. I'd prefer not to be called senator. I wouldn't stand up here and say, hi, I'm President Scott Wagner of Penn Waste. I'd say, hi, I'm Scott Wagner. I'm the president of Penn Waste. So I sort of have but trust me, this really strokes a lot of people to be called senator. And if you look at some of our leadership, senator this and senator that, it is like, they are like walking on a cloud, and that only fuels the ego situation. So I've been in more non-productive, energy-draining meetings in my whole life. I hate meetings. We don't have meetings at Penn Waste. If you want to have a meeting, come down and see me as a group, and I'm available. We'll have 10, 15 minutes or whatever we need. We'll get it done, and we're gone. But I'm serious. And then they sit around for the last 15 minutes. Well, everybody get their calendars out so we can schedule the next meeting, okay? But I will tell you that the unions are in control. Take that to the bank, okay? If I tell you one thing tonight, the unions are in control. And I single-handedly am taking on the PSEA. That's the teachers' union, and that is the Pennsylvania Education Association. And I want to make it clear, I'm not taking on teachers. I'm taking on the union. And I will tell you that at least 40 to 50% of the teachers that are members of that union have to be Republicans. Did you know that the PSEA will collect this year $100 million in dues? They don't collect their money. It's all collected through automatic deduction. At least $30 million is eligible for political activities, okay? I will tell you that the recall election with Governor Walker in Wisconsin, do you know that the Pennsylvania State Education Association sent money, union dues from teachers collected in Pennsylvania to unseat Walker? Now, I'm curious, how would the Republican teachers feel about that, okay? I'm sorry. So I've put a target on my back with the union, and you know what I'm learning? The head of the union is actually a school teacher. And, I've never met the guy, but I'm not overly impressed with what I see, and they will not talk to reporters. They won't answer any questions. Everything is no comment, no comment. So here's a guy that makes like 120. The union supplements another 150 or 60. I think he makes like 280. And I will tell you that there are many teachers that if they could get out of the union, they would, and they want to teach the children. So my agenda is not to go after teachers. I'm going after the union monster that's creating the problem, okay? So, you know, I just have a few other items, but I will tell you that the Senate Majority Leader controls the Senate. His name's Dominic Pileggi. He controls any bill that goes on the floor. I have worked hard. The first week I was there, Jason and I went down to see Senator Pileggi over paycheck protection. He said, go around and see how many votes you could get. Now, I did something that he never expected. I did a follow-up memo of our meeting, and basically as he instructed us, and we sent it down to him. And he thought maybe I sent it out to everybody. But we went around, we took 3 months and went from office to office. We were Mike Folmer's out. Went from office to office to find out whether we could get a vote. And we were getting close. And I think we are close, and I think we have 2 Democrats, which we've met with, which we believe will vote for paycheck protection. And I went across the aisle to find these people, okay? But Senator Pileggi doesn't want to put the vote up because if it's a no vote, then he doesn't want to risk those Senate members, and most likely it will be those 5 Republicans who are endorsed by the union voting no. Well, you know, in my world, and I've been on a lot of boards, let's vote and let's see who the men are and let's see who the cowards are, okay? And that's what this is all about. So that's the problem. If I've answered your question, that's the whole problem in a nutshell. So, yeah, I've been there for 5 months, and I will tell you that, and again, I just tell you the facts, and I'm getting more bold when I say this. I'm not taking the pension. I don't turn in any expenses. I drive my car to Harrisburg, and I pay for my own fuel. You go to my office in Harrisburg, I personally pay for the coffee and the water. My salary is $84,000. After taxes, my salary is $57,000. So far, I've racked up $20,000 in legal fees because I have Stock and Leader doing an ethics opinion on me to make sure that I don't have any conflicts of interest with state contracts, because I pick up like 6 liquor stores at $60 a store, but it's a state contract. And so I have other expenses. When I go out, I haven't been out with any lobbyists, but I did go out with an association president and one of my friends who is a constituent. At the end of the dinner, I said, I want the bill. They were going to arm wrestle me at the table. I said, it's easier for me to pay the bill. When this is all said and done this year, I will be negative, but I'm going to Harrisburg because I'll tell you, the more and more I'm doing this, you and most of you in this room went out and wrote my name in, and that's a very big deal. And for that, I am humbled and honored. And I receive letters from time to time, but you know, this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to keep doing this, and it's going to get ugly. But I received a letter today. Dear Senator Wagner, we want to thank you for your efforts by enacting much-needed reforms in Pennsylvania. My husband and I wholeheartedly support your stand to identify the waste, fraud, and abuse in government spending, the important new ways to eliminate the waste. Then implement new ways to eliminate the waste. We commend your courage to do the right thing and stand up, even though you were criticized as you were because of the email from your re-election campaign, plus the online video, Lord of the Freebies, Home of the Enslaved, and that was July 4th. And we voted for you in the special election on March 18th, and we'll definitely vote for you again in November. After reading the July 15th York Dispatch newspaper article, we're even more convinced that you are the candidate who is needed in Pennsylvania to champion. I get a lot of these, and this is the kind of stuff that motivates me. And I've sort of done a head count. I think there's almost 125 people here tonight. The fact that you're here tonight, 125 to 150 people, I get these letters. We get a lot of comments. This is what's motivating me, and I'm moving into the fun phase, okay? And I'll tell you what the fun phase is. The first 60 days, I have 3 personalities. My first personality is John Wayne. We're already past that. Second personality is Clint Eastwood. Make my day. You remember that 44 Magnum? Well, my third personality is Rambo, okay? So we're moving into that. So I appreciate your support. I want you to know I drive a diesel car. And if you ever go to a pump, the diesel nozzle is always full of diesel fuel. You get it all over your hands and everything. So in the back of my car, I carry a box of rubber gloves, okay? And here they are, okay? So I bought a pair out tonight, and I just thought I'd close with a little humor. I would say that the next 6 months in Harrisburg with me up there in leadership are going to get a little bloody. So you know what? I'm not getting blood on my hands. Just so you know, I carry gloves just in case. Thank you very much.
Senator Mike Folmer from the 48th District, which is northeast and Cumberland, right? Northeast York?
Actually, it's all of Lebanon County, southern Dauphin County, and now a portion of northern York County, which is, they moved me west.
Cool. All right, Senator Folmer.
Good evening. I'll be real quick. I will not contribute to global warming any more than I necessarily have to. It's been a long evening, and you heard, I think Scott said it all. I'm State Senator Mike Folmer. I'm from Lebanon, Pennsylvania, born and raised. I still live in the city. Actually, I live in the house I grew up in. I'm married. I have 2 adult married children that have blessed me with 7 grandchildren. I came into the Senate back in 2006 over the great pay raise uproar that the people had. I've been carrying this with me ever since I've been in office. This is my Constitution. It's the Pennsylvania State Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the U.S. Constitution. I carry it with me everywhere I go. I'm telling you all this because a lot of you folks probably do not know of me. I am not in the pension system, not in the healthcare system. I am like Scott. I drive my own car. It's a 2007 Honda Civic with 184,000 miles on it. But it works and it's great, and it was actually manufactured in the United States, so just not in Pennsylvania. Which brings me to my main point here. I do those things with my pension, with my health care, not because I'm trying to be a really good guy. I do it because I believe Article 2, Section 8 of our state constitution does not allow me to do so. That's why I do it. It's my interpretation. I try not to stuff it in anybody's face, but I believe that we were meant to be a part-time legislature. I believe that we artificially moved into a full-time legislature and such. But what I really want to talk to you about is what I'm really about. Ladies and gentlemen, I love this state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was the place where this country was born, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We were born here, the greatest nation in the world. Matter of fact, Alexis de Tocqueville, who traveled throughout this whole country, made a great statement about this country. He said, America is great because she is good. When she ceases to be good, she'll cease to be great. We were born here in Pennsylvania, right down in Philadelphia. The Union was saved at Gettysburg, and the Industrial Revolution went through the state of Pennsylvania. After World War I, Pennsylvania was the 3rd largest economy in the world. The 3rd largest economy in the world. Only the American and British economies were ahead of us. Actually, when John F. Kennedy was president back in 1960, in the early 60s, I think we were still like 6th. I think we're still in the top 25, but we're heading in the wrong direction. See, what's really irritating me the most about anything about Pennsylvania is this. I am tired of states like South Carolina, Alabama, Indiana, Texas, and so forth eating our lunch. What I'm saying is this. In each of those states, why didn't BMW come to Pennsylvania? Why didn't Mercedes-Benz come to Pennsylvania? Why did Airbus Aeronautics go to Mobile, Alabama? Why is Michelin Tire, Continental Tire in South Carolina? Why is Boeing in South Carolina? We're there because we're not a right-to-work state. And this touches on the very issue that Scott was talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, I grew up in a blue-collar Democratic household. I'm going to tell you that straight up. My grandfather was such a strong FDR guy that he would give up a produce delivery if someone complained about FDR. I know because I had to pull the produce out of their cooler because he got in a fight with the owner of the store who was complaining about FDR. And I couldn't understand that, but we were trying to sell it. But anyway, I give you that as the background because I grew up with that whole union mantra. I understood it. I'm right to work because I don't hate unions. It's not my point. And private sector unions, I have a major problem with public sector unions. I don't think there should be any. But if you want to form a union, fine. But my question to them is this. If you're going to form a union, and I want that union boss to come to me and tell me why they're going to take a union dues and tell me what the value that's going to be. Because you see in South Carolina, the BMW plant, every year they go around, they ask them what color car they want if you work there. Because every year they get a new car. Now, they got to get rid of that car after a year, but they turn it back. And it's actually a great sales point by BMW because they show everybody driving their cars, and they probably resell it on a high-end retail market, on the used car market. What union's going to give me that? I mean, plus a great benefit and so forth. See, those jobs should be here. And it wouldn't cost us a dime to be right to work. May cause some problems with the way the unions control our state, but it wouldn't cost us a penny. Because you see, that is driving towards the top. See, when we talk about prevailing wage, minimum wage, when we talk about those type of items, we're talking about the bottom. What's minimum wage? Minimum wage is nothing, right? In all honesty, it's nice. And people might want to increase it, but that doesn't raise to the top. I want those family-sustaining careers that BMW, Boeing, Hankook Tire, 6th largest tire manufacturer in the world, out of Korea, is going to be building a $1 billion tire plant here in the United States, but they're not going to be in Pennsylvania. Ladies and gentlemen, we live within over 100 million people in an overnight drive. That's 1/3 of the population of the United States. Manufacturers should want to be in Pennsylvania. We have the right workforce. We have the natural resources. We got the location. But we're allowing the unions to dictate that not to happen. And there lies the problem. That's who Mike Folmer is. I want family-sustaining careers. I want Pennsylvania to be that place again that everybody wants to come to. I'm tired of our youth leaving our state. I'm tired of the brain drain that's happening. We have some of the finest research institutions in the world right here in this state. We should have BMW. We should have had Boeing. We should have had Mercedes-Benz and Honda and Toyota. We should have them here. That's where they belong. Now, it comes down to this, is that do our fellow legislators have the political will to do that? And I think Scott touched on it. I'm not going to go over it again. I couldn't do it better. And I don't have rubber gloves on me, so I'm not going to be able to emulate that. But I will say that that's what I'm about. And the other thing I'm really about, folks, that you have to understand is I'm about your civil liberties. I am sick and tired of my individual, God-given, indefeasible rights being encroached upon. And it's happening on a daily basis. I'm just telling you that, whether it's from NDAA or drones or so forth. Look, I love technology. I want our military to be strong. I want us to be able to defend ourselves, and we need to be there. I get that. But I don't want it at the sacrifice of my personal liberties and my personal freedoms. I'm just letting you know that. And that goes into what foods I'm allowed to eat or what medicines I'm allowed to take. And that's why I did my Senate Bill 1182, the medical cannabis bill. Now, mine's a little more comprehensive than what Scott's trying to do. And I really appreciate, Scott, because you kept it on the news. You kept it alive. You're going forward. But I'm not going to demonize this whole plant, this plant that I believe God created and put here. Now, man has abused it. I agree with that. But I will tell you, and you can go to my website, that THCA and THCV kills cancer cells. It reduces tumors. I can show you that cannabis can help with diabetes, multiple sclerosis, various cancers, PTSD, ADHD, without the same harmful side effects that a lot of our FDA-approved medications that are on the market today. But we, as individuals, should have the right, through the advice of our medical professional, in a pure medical environment, in a controlled atmosphere, have a right to have that medication. I just believe that wholeheartedly. But it's the same thing as I should be able to drink my raw milk, too, without any government interference. It's my food, it's my body, it's my right, it's my indefeasible right. Remember this, folks. Any people that allow the government to tell them what foods they can eat and what medicines they can take are in the same sorry state as those who live under tyranny. I'm just letting you know that. And we have an indefeasible and inalienable right to pursue our happiness, to defend our lives. And that's what I'm about. And that's why I carry my Constitution. I'm not trying to be corny here. I'm not. I take it very seriously. I took an oath under God. I'm a Christian. On this corner, I carry my Constitution. On this side, I carry my New Testament. with the Psalms and stuff because I can't get my whole Bible in my coat pocket. But I need that at times because with Scott I get frustrated, and I try to take my I try to go to my with my devotions and stuff, and every times I'll be sitting on the Senate floor and I'll pull out my New Testament. I'll open up a Psalm or a proverb and just to say, all right, Mike, I'm not here about Mike Folmer. I'm here about Pennsylvania, and we got to move these things forward. You don't know how happy I was when Scott Wagner won. You have no clue what you good people here in York County did by getting Scott Wagner up there. Scott has definitely brought a new vigor, new excitement, and quite frankly, dude, you never know what he's going to say. But it's in a positive way. And I'll say this, and Scott is one of the smartest businessmen I ever met in my entire life. And something else that people don't understand, yeah, Scott gets upset and he'll tell you the way it is, and that's awesome. But Scott also has one of the most compassionate hearts I ever met anybody have too. So you have a very good representative here, and I just wish we had 200 Scott Perrys in D.C. So so Scott, I mean seriously. So I mean, this is who I am. I'm going to shut up. I'm glad to represent portions of York County. My ending part to you is this, ladies and gentlemen. If you agree with me 51% of the time, please help me and support me. If you agree with me 100% of the time, you ought to have your head examined. Okay? That's all I'm saying. All right? Thank you very much.
All right, I'd like to thank Mike, Alex, Scott, and Kristen, and Kate, thank you, and everybody for coming out. I think this was a great meeting. Everybody chewed up my time, but like Mike said, it's not about me, it's about you and the issues and getting things done. I may get out and do maybe a video online. A couple quick things though. With things that are changing here in York County in politics, we need more people to help. Right here in the 912 Patriots, we need somebody to head up a membership, outreach, fundraising, and merchandise committees. Next month, we're going to have a members-only meeting, and we're going to be electing president and secretary and treasurer. Contact us. Let us know who you are, what you want to run for. Get in touch. Get involved with the races. Get in touch with the candidates. See if you can help them out. I know we're over time here. I just like to say I love the passion out of the Scott, Mike, Scott, and Alex. We need more of that in politics. Also, our group, we work on donations. I thank everybody who actually donated and helped us out. We work mostly on donations and memberships. We do get some other sponsors. But without you guys, the memberships and the donations, we would not be able to do this. We try to do it about 6-7 times a year. September, I said that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.